Good evening. Thank you for
Great.
spending a little time on your Thursday night with us. We know that February is a busy, busy time and spring break seems very far away. So we've talked to a lot of stressed out students this week, and we are grateful to get a little bit of time to share some of that insight with you. I'm Katie Dunn. I'm a Director of Educational Planning here at Prep Matters. And I am joined tonight by my wonderful colleague. Want to introduce yourself, Ryan?
Absolutely. I'm Ryan Warren. I've been with Prep Matters since 2007 in a variety of roles. Currently, I'm nominally creative director as well as a tutor, and I'm incredibly excited to give this chat. We've done a number of these executive function talks over the years with various combinations of us, and me from the tutoring side, working with students on academic support, executive functioning, and Katie, of course, from the ed counseling side.
And I will say we have actually just trained a ton of new executive functioning and organizational tutors because we are finding more requests for this work than ever. We know that the switch back into real life school was very, very welcome, but also brought with it a number of complications on your school skills, your study habits, some things you learned and unlearned and relearned over the course of COVID. So we are going to dig right in and talk about some big picture things and some little picture things, some strategies and some roadblocks. If you have questions along the way, please feel free to use the Q&A function and we'll try and keep an eye on it. And you are also welcome to upvote someone else's question during the Q&A if you see it in there and you'd also like to know the answer. So let's just jump in, Ryan.
Sounds great. So our talk is titled How to Stay Focused and on Task. However, very frequently, staying focused and on task means thinking a little bit broader than that, setting up our lives so that we have the mental bandwidth to settle into the deep work that's so difficult to make room for with everything: email, social media, social obligations, school, etc., extracurriculars. So the first thing I want to do is zoom out a little bit and talk about managing expectations. When I was growing up, I had a lot of difficulty staying organized, handing my work in, and I was pretty hard on myself for a long time. And I don't think that having kind of a punitive approach was super useful for me. And I also was given a lot of tools that might work for some people some of the time, but frequently didn't work for me and my rhythm throughout my day and throughout my week and month. So I just want to acknowledge that while we're going to share some of the things that we've tried for ourselves and things that we workshop with our clients, there really are no silver bullets here. Everybody's a little bit different, and sometimes you'll pick a tool up for a little while and then you'll put the tool back down. So really, just like with any kind of learning, managing our schedules, managing our focus and attention are a matter of trial and error. And being aware of that is really useful. As we say here, a good plan leaves plenty of room for flexibility. And we have much more control over how we respond to mistakes than we do over avoiding mistakes altogether.
Right, we're all going to make mistakes.
So this is a quote from the boss's book, just putting a little plug in there for What Do You Say? And it speaks to this notion that when we're trying to adjust our lives, when we're trying to change our habits and kind of do this hard work to make ourselves more efficient at the things we want to get done, we can have some ambivalence about that. And frequently what can happen, whether we're trying to improve our own executive functioning or whether we're trying to sort of assist our children, there can be a little bit of pushback, a little bit of resistance there. And what I recommend is trying to move from an inner guard to an inner gardener. So I just want to point out a little bit about this kind of dichotomy that I'm setting up. On the one side, it can be very easy to be harsh with ourselves. Okay, we need to buckle down. We need to really sort of be disciplined. A lot of this kind of grit talk, a lot of this moral fortitude conversation. And I think there is a place for that, but I don't think it's the whole story. So I like the metaphor of sort of cultivation, that we want to move from controlling our behavior or our children's behavior to an approach that's a little bit more collaborative, that understands our motivations, rather than just sort of insisting on an outcome or on a process. And when we're in a gardening mode, we're looking for growth. We're not looking for obedience. We're looking to understand. And it might be the case that water is really necessary, but sometimes it's too much water. Same with sunlight and so on. Great. So moving on, this is kind of our roadmap that we'll be tracking. Managing our focus is also about managing ourselves. And what we find is in working with clients, there's all kinds of things that can get in the way. Katie, do you want to speak to a few of those?
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of these probably sound familiar. Some of them may not even sound like bad things when you think about them. I work a lot with students who are self-proclaimed perfectionists, and it's just awkward when I remind them that humans aren't perfect. So they're sort of setting themselves up to fail from the beginning. And when you are stuck in a cycle of guilt or worry or anxiety or perfectionism or any of these things, they stop you from moving forward in your task because they're setting up a roadblock, and it doesn't always look like perfectionism or guilt or worry. What I hear most from students, from teachers, and from parents is, man, that kid is lazy, or, oh, Miss Dunn, I'm just super lazy. And I got to tell you, I have been a teacher and a tutor and a principal and a counselor for a very long time, and very rarely are you lazy. Most of us are as humans willing to work hard and do work and do things to move forward when we feel competent and ready and prepared to do so. And we avoid those things when we don't. So part of what you want to do as you're trying to figure out how to get yourself into the right mindset is to take a step back, as Ryan said, and think about, like, all right, how am I managing just being me? How am I, as the slide tells you, how am I starting my day in a way that is good for me? I figured out shortly after getting a dog that it takes me an hour to get out of the house in the morning. I don't know why it takes an hour. I can't figure out exactly where I could shave time off that. It seems like a lot, but once I figured that out, then I'm able to have a morning where my dog gets walked, my coffee gets made, I get reasonably professional clothing on, I get the dishes done or whatever I need to do, and I get out the house in a way that feels like I have left home okay, ready for me to get back later, and I am ready to come to work.
One thing that I think, if I could just jump in there, one thing that I think happens for me with, man, where did all that time go, is any given task feels like it rounds to zero, right? Like it's 30 seconds, it's a minute and a half. That's pretty much at zero. But the problem is there's 400 tasks that are involved.
Right. None of that's hard, and suddenly it's been an hour. Yep. This morning, I woke up early because I meet my sister and a good friend for a walk at 6:30 a couple mornings a week. And I overslept. And I got out of the house so fast. I didn't walk the dog. I did because she was coming with me for the walk. I had so many things. I was so proud of myself. And it was still 35 minutes. Like, I don't know how it took. I don't know what happened. And I think that same thing, a lot of it, Ryan's point about, like, I'm not always aware of what I'm doing. I think directions everywhere take a half hour. Now they probably don't. I probably don't live a half hour from every destination I have, but I always assume it's going to be a half hour. And this happens with my body too. Especially when I was younger, I did a lot of activities. I did a lot of leadership. I took all the AP classes. I did all the things. That is actually not that's sort of manageable in high school because some of the structure is in place for you with your school day and your family, and you kind of have some things going for you. And then I got to college and was still doing all the things, and there was no one telling me what I should be doing. I got to tell you, at Prep Matters, one of the most common requests we get for help on this sort of organization is students in their freshman year in college, because suddenly it feels like you have your whole day ahead of you and you're still not getting things done. And what I found was if I didn't eat more and sleep more, I couldn't handle anything. And I didn't know that until I was able to kind of take a step back and look at how I was examining my day. So as you are starting off every day, think about what kind of sleep did I get? What does my body need? What things do I need to bring to school? What's the weather going to be like today? Did I bring the right shoes? All of that so that you get out the door cleanly and you're able to kind of start the day without already feeling behind.
Absolutely. Yeah, a couple notes on that. One thing that I know people often tell those with ADHD, well, just do some journaling, and it's sort of it's easy to make fun of that. I don't do any in-depth journaling, but I do find that it's frequently useful for me to boil down kind of like the common denominator. What do I absolutely need/want to get done with this day? And that might just be mentally looking at my calendar and sort of being aware of what my priorities might be. Because as you were alluding to, Katie, I think what can happen in my day is I think I have all of this time. And then there are a lot of tasks that look like productive work or feel like work because I'm not really enjoying myself. And so I end up kind of spinning my wheels a little bit. And if I have a little bit of time in the morning to maybe use a 5-minute journal or bullet journal, maybe to do some meditation, or maybe just to kind of go for a nice walk and take a quiet moment, that can give me a lot more focus throughout my day.
So Ryan spends a lot of time in our world helping the rest of us manage our technology use. So I'm gonna have him walk us through this.
Absolutely. So I think this is a challenge for all of us. And particularly with in the pandemic, I think as parents, we're often aware of how much screen times our children are getting. And almost always when we say something like that, for me anyway, I have in the back of my mind, okay, well, how are my habits stacking up here? So I do think that this is sort of like I don't want to use the terminology of a battle, but it's a challenge that I think we're all confronting a good bit of the time. Here are some small things that you can do to try to increase the likelihood that you have that balance that you're looking for. For me anyway, email is a huge part of my day, and it can be really easy for quick little emails to sort of break up what would otherwise be a really nice chunk of time where I can sort of dig in and get some deep work in. And when I really need to focus and spend some time on a specific task, what I will do is set aside 45 minutes, again, being intentional about kind of budgeting my time, which we'll talk about in a bit. Set aside maybe 45 minutes in the morning, a little time in the afternoon, and then a little bit of time at night that are going to be specifically for responding to email. so that I'm not keeping all of these loops open throughout the entirety of my day, feeling like I'm always trying to do everything all of the time, as the current song has it. Use technology when helpful. I think sometimes technology can be used to fight against itself, if you will. So there's tons of apps out there that can that can steer you and incentivize you to put the phone away at certain times. We talked a little bit about minimizing distractions. And I think having a good calendar system or using a task management app like Asana or Monday or Slack, something that you like aesthetically, a sort of digital place that you like to be, or sort of a good old-fashioned planner. And I think the key there is, particularly for those of us who might have sort of dopamine-seeking executive function issues, I think having something that's just, this is how I do it, this is what I always do, can be really useful, provided that we're consistently evaluating, is this working for me? And kind of checking in on ourselves.
I would also add, let's go back to that last slide for 1 second. I'm with Ryan on the way email takes over my life. But I think that many of the teenagers I work with have the opposite of impact, and that they are not checking their email at all, which is as much of a struggle. Many of your teachers are emailing you. I might be emailing you. Colleges are emailing you. And so making it a deliberate kind of chunk of time is really important. And then the strategy that Ryan laid out for setting a time when you are going to do this thing and not be distracted from the other things is also a really good stand-in strategy for social media. In my case, I find that I don't realize I've suddenly opened up one of my social media apps and it's been 25 minutes and I'm still kind of staring at it. So it's the same strategy, even if you are not using email in quite the same way.
That's great. Completely agree. One thing I'll often do is I'll use my smart speaker just to, I'll say set an alarm for 5 minutes or 8 minutes or what have you. Because frequently I don't know that time is passing. And so, so just having some disruption, it's amazing how frequently I'll find myself sort of like in the flow of being on social or answering emails. And I won't realize how long it's been until, the door opens and one of the kids are home, or there's some kind of external prompt there.
This is the reason I don't keep a video game system hooked up at my house, because I would get fired.
That is great.
I think I'm going to play for a half an hour and it's been 3 hours.
I have a similar rule about junk food. It's way easier for me to say no to ones at the store.
Yep, and we will talk about that in a little while, both of those examples, when we get a little more into some of the building good habits, triggers, and success. Both Ryan and I just showed you ways that we had to sort of build things into our lives so that we didn't have to make every decision all the time.
Absolutely. I think one thing that we're frequently doing when we're overusing social media or comfort eating in the afternoon or boredom eating, or whatever we're doing when we would maybe rather be spending it on higher value items on our task list, is trying to feel less stressed, distract ourselves from stress, comfort ourselves, trying to get past that sort of excitement, that over caffeinated, over alert anxiety and stress that we can frequently feel. And one of the best ways that we can manage our stress is by making sure that we have good sleep hygiene, a plan for going to bed that's relatively consistent, both in terms of how much it is and also that works with our circadian rhythms so that it's relatively consistent from day to day. And I know this is the most boring thing to say, But it really makes such a difference in my level of productivity if I've gotten, you know, a comfortable amount of sleep, or if I've compromised that.
Yeah, I
Do you
mean,
have
I could do a
a
whole webinar on sleep. It's absolutely critical, and you don't believe it when you're not living that way because you don't realize how different your body. It gets back to the point that we started with, that sometimes your bad habits are tough to give up because you know how to live with this bad habit, and it's unusual or scary or daunting to think about how to live without it. So many students, years when I was a teacher and a principal, would say to me, I just can't get everything done. And then I'd say, well, bring me your planner and we'll look at, I get it. You've got trumpet and you've got lacrosse and you've got all the things you've got. And in fact, if you do make a plan, and we'll talk about that in a couple of slides, you can always get to bed on time. And if you do it and you're not wasting all that time, you are so much more functional. And sleep is where everything you learned moves from your short-term memory. I learned this thing today when I was reading Great Gatsby, into your long-term memory. I know this thing now and can pull it up when I'm writing that AP exam at the end of the year. That only happens when your brain is getting enough sleep.
Sorry, speaking of settling into deep work and distractions that will come up. What are some of your favorite sort of tips for winding down and going to bed? Because I think sometimes we know, like, oh, it's important, but like, how though? As my
So
students would say.
there's a reason that when we're training babies to sleep, we set them a consistent pattern, and that a pattern often includes thoughtful speech. What are you grateful for? Mommy loves you. Maybe some prayers if that's your tradition, and often includes reading. So it shouldn't include screens, even if that's the way you are typically used to reading. It's tiring for your eyes. It stimulates you. Light stimulates us. That's part of what we are trained to do biologically. But things that themselves have a rhythm. So if you want to listen to music, you can listen to music. Just make sure it doesn't have words. Your brain can't stop processing the words. So some quieter music that just has sound, or some white noise. I will say I actually really love the Rain on Tent app that I have, that like is just like the trickle that you get if you're camping.
Sounds great.
So there's a ton of research about like make your bedroom a little bit cool so your body temperature cools down. But I think it's really about like finding your plan, keeping your screens away, and letting yourself settle into sleep, because you also shouldn't be hitting the bed and immediately crashing. If you are immediately asleep in 15 seconds, that means you are way too tired. Your body should take some time to settle into the sleep. And if you crash like that, then you're not going to have a good night's sleep because your body wasn't ready to do it.
Whoops. Great.
Ooh, this is one of
And-
my favorites.
Oh, take it away.
So I have spent a lot of time over the years working with students as they transition from 8th grade to 9th grade. And that's a lot of the time where school becomes a little more serious, where homework starts to count, where you start to lose credit because you did a thing, but you didn't turn it in and nobody asked you for it. So you didn't realize you hadn't turned it in. A lot of this organization challenges come up when you're in 9th grade because teachers are managing less for you and parents are managing less for you, and they should be. So as you're trying to learn how to focus, especially on homework, there's a couple things you can do. And I think a lot of us found these skills both super valuable and kind of tested during COVID. And so what you want to do is think about, where is it that I'm doing my work? Where is my homework spot where I'm supposed to be thinking? And if your homework spot is on your bed, which was often where I wanted my homework spot to be when I was in high school, because I was one of those kids who was always tired and wanted to crash. If my homework spot is on my bed, where my body knows it's supposed to be relaxed and sleepy, I'm not going to do very good studying because I'm relaxed and sleepy. Or I'm not going to do very good sleeping because my body is ready to be stressed and studying on my bed. So your bed's out. That's not an option. So you want to have a space that is the space where you do homework that is different from where you relax, where you watch TV. You also might want to think about the physical experience of learning some of your courses. I know a lot of kids who benefit from moving around their room when they're doing different chores. I did some work from home yesterday, and you see where I'm sitting now. I did one meeting from here. I did one meeting from the other side of this table I'm at, that I was sitting on a different chair. And I did one meeting upstairs because I had been sitting in this house for way too long, and I wasn't going to be fresh and responsible for my students if I was just staring at my screen from the same spot. So you also do want to think about, who are the other people in your house? Where will they be coming? If you're going to be super annoyed that your cat is on your lap or your little sister wants to play, then stay out of those spaces. Stay in your own space, so that you know what your brain is supposed to be doing. And we don't have this in here, but we sort of imply it at the end. I would also say this is a good way to think about the physical spaces of things you actually are studying. What kind of folders are you using? How are you holding your books? Where are things stored physically as you are trying to learn from them? Because your body will just develop kind of go-to habits. And I think that's a piece we really lost during COVID that we can now get back in the way we use our body to help trigger our learning memories.
Fantastic. Love it. The only thing I'll add is that sometimes students with ADHD will prefer the bed because they like how it challenges kind of their physicality, right? So they're kind of scrunched up and they're writing, and they're,
This is Ryan's argument that he likes to study on his bed. I was
no,
thinking
it's
of
really
beanbag
not.
chair.
No. So I was what I do sometimes though is study on the floor.
Yes.
Because that's also an option. And I think we forget that after we're like 10. But get out of your bedroom and find a comfortable space of floor, because, oftentimes all of the surfaces of our ADHD spaces are covered in stuff. And
which
so
are all distractions.
Right,
Yep.
right. So we can curate that, and we need to sort of work with all of those spaces. But I think that's one thing people are sort of moving towards with the bed is, okay, I have this rectangle that's sort of free from other distractions, and so you can make that for yourself.
Yep.
In the computer room, in downstairs in the dining room, right? Just move the table over a little bit and pull up a piece of floor.
Yep.
So frequently, if you find yourself kind of veering to the bed thing, check the floor out. It's there.
Agreed.
I like this one, managing inertia. So,
I just had a conversation about this with a student on Sunday. This is a huge point.
Fantastic. So yeah, I mean, for me, this is probably the second hardest sort of skill that's associated with executive functioning. Transitions for me are the worst, but next up on the list are these anything that requires getting started. Once I start, there's sort of feedback and dialogue with whatever I'm doing. It has kind of an automatic quality to it, but getting started kind of requires a little bit of extra force to dislodge me. So I think what gets in my way when I'm really being avoidant and procrastinating or some such is that either the task feels too big or I feel too small, right? So I think a lot of the helpful ways to encourage ourselves to get down to business have to do with breaking the task down so that the task feels less scary, or having sort of a more realistic, balanced view of ourselves as competent enough to tackle it. I think we'll just kind of move past Mr. Rogers because for the sake of time. So one thing I really like along this front is Charles Duhigg has a really nice phrase in his book, The Power of Habit, which is to floss one tooth. So the idea here is you take whatever you're about to do. So maybe you're going to study all of the Russian Revolution in world history class. And so you have 30 pages to read, and then you have another worksheet or what have you. Rather than thinking about those 30 boring pages that you're dreading, get the book out and sit it down on your nice empty piece of floor, right? And just make that be the thing that you're starting. Another thing that you can do, and that I do really frequently, is I will kind of gamify getting started. So if I need to empty the dishwasher, because that's going to make my space much more comfortable later, what I'll do is I'll ask my smart speaker to set a timer for 1 minute. And then I'll just work as hard as I can for that 1 minute. Other things that you can do if you do have ADHD, and probably even if you don't, it's still useful, is take 2 tasks that you don't want to do, and you're kind of bobbling between, should I do this or should I do that? Assign 1 heads and 1 tails, flip a coin, and then you just have to do that thing, right? So let some randomizer decide. That gives a little bit of excitement and makes it a little bit more game-like. Another thing is just in terms of engagement, particularly if you find yourself repeatedly putting a task off. Sometimes for me, it's easier to ask, why am I putting this task off, than it is to start the task. Now, I don't want to use that as an excuse not to do it, but oftentimes if I am really honest with myself about something I'm procrastinating on, it's, oh, I don't quite have the clarity that I need, or I'm not sure I have the materials, or I'm waiting on somebody else, or I don't feel competent. And that's a great time to involve somebody else, to sort of reach out if you can be vulnerable with a friend. Man, I really find myself not wanting to do this. Are there any tips that you have? Is there something you're avoiding, and we can kind of hold each other accountable?
I want to stick with that for one thought too, and to take this a little bit into the world of college admissions, because a lot of what happens in high school is we sort of accumulate a set of accomplishments. I got some grades, I got some test scores, I did some things. This is my pile of stuff that I'm going to pull together and send into a college admissions officer to evaluate for me. And that's part of it. Part of college admissions is about our accomplishments, but a ton more of it is about your capacity to be thoughtful and reflective about those accomplishments. So being able to say to yourself, why am I not getting this done? Why am I always not getting something? Why am I never able to start those history papers? I'm pretty solid on my lab reports. I'm pretty solid on my English papers, and the history ones like always get me down. Or I'm pretty good at my homework, but whenever I have a big project, I just avoid it. Trying to figure out where that comes from. Those are the things that helped a college admissions officer look at your transcript and then see a real person behind that transcript. And the real person is who gets into college. And so developing this habit early of being reflective about, I've known a ton of people who avoid tasks because they are going back to that first list, anxious or perfectionist or worried, all those things that get in your way. But instead you get caught up in like, now I'm mad at myself for being lazy. Now I'm mad at myself for procrastinating. And so you're in this cycle of, you're using all your energy to be frustrated with yourself instead of using that energy to just take that to floss that first tooth. So getting some of that out of your head, journaling on it, telling your sister, telling a friend, all of that can help you just get over that hump and develop those habits of mind as well as those habits of school.
Fantastic. Love it. Now we're on to managing habits. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. This is frequently attributed to Aristotle, but I believe it was a paraphrase of
He didn't quite say
Aristotle,
it, but he sort of said it.
just to be a super nerd about things. It's still a great quote, nonetheless. So one thing I think about habits is that we can have a very binary sense of, am I on track? Am I off track? And if that works for you, that's fantastic. A lot of people really like that gamesmanship of like, all right, I'm giving myself a gold star today because I did the thing that was scary, and I don't want to lose my streak. If that works, fantastic. If it doesn't, that's fine. We'll find another way. So I think what we want to do with our habits is increase the likelihood that we're successful. And
And
one
the thing
thing
about the reason, can we take one step back, Ryan? The reason habit is important is because, in fact, 90% of how you live your life is a habit, whether you realize it or not. That's how humans are designed, because making decisions is exhausting. And your mind can't do it after a while, so you can't keep asking it to. So it always defaults into what the habit is. So your best bet is to try and make some habits that are good and that increase, therefore, the likelihood of your success.
I love it. Fantastic. And when you're putting those habits into your schedule, you're finding places in your day when you're going to initiate your bedtime routine, or you're going to start your day with a cup of tea and the 5-minute journal. What you want to look for are points in your schedule that already are there. Now, these often are transitions. After I do this, I always do that. Whenever you can find kind of a leverage point like that in your day, it can be really powerful because you know that always happens. And that's a good cue for your brain to associate some kind of trigger. Okay, after, when I come in the door, before I take my shoes off, I'm going to make a checklist of what I need to get done before I spend half an hour on TikTok. So anytime you can find a trigger that already exists, it's much easier to add part of a sequence to a habit than to inject an entire new habit, if that makes sense, because you're already using those
Ryan made the point.
automatic rhythms.
Ryan made the point before about junk food. I realized in graduate school that when I got home from class, I ate whatever was on the left counter. Just whatever was there, I ate it. It was usually cookies. Once I figured out that I shouldn't be keeping the cookies on the place that I went for my snack, I started keeping, then it was apples. And whatever it was, I was just as happy to eat it because I already had the habit of walking in and grabbing something from there.
Kind of a path. Oftentimes we take the path of least resistance. So make that path work for you, so you don't feel like you're constantly trying to shovel water uphill. Fantastic. Another thing that can be really useful is making sure that you have a reward. Our brains tend to remember the beginning and end of things rather than the part in the middle. So you have the trigger, you know, oh, okay, now I'm going to do the thing. And then you add your little sequence. Okay, I'm making my task list, or I'm checking my calendar, whatever you're trying to move, change, improve. Then you want to give yourself some kind of reward. And the reward doesn't need to be a cookie, and it doesn't need to be anything elaborate. Sometimes it can be sort of congratulating yourself, right? Or texting your friend and being like, boom, you know, 3 weeks in a row, I've been eating oatmeal for breakfast and no cookies on the counter. So the reward piece, I think, is really key. Duhigg, again, in his book, which I highly recommend, along with Atomic Habits, which is sort of he didn't write it, but it's very much in the same vein and sort of response to it. He tells the story of toothpaste. So apparently, before the 20th century, dental hygiene was a little touch and go. And toothpaste was actually kind of terrible. It was just like pure baking soda. It was very unpleasant. And so very few people were sort of doing that habit. So the mint in toothpaste is a perfect example of kind of a really small little micro reward because you're doing the virtuous thing, you're caring for your teeth, that's going to be better long term. The mintiness of it doesn't really clean the teeth, it's just pleasant. So adding the tiniest little things sometimes can really shift habits in major ways. Oh, fantastic. Managing school. That sounds like something that Katie Dunn has done far better than Ryan Warren at
Right.
times.
Well, like I said, a lot of my time as a counselor and certainly as a teacher and a principal is about helping kids figure out the game of school. So that's a secret that teachers don't tell you, but it's true. If you think about the students you know who are most successful in your school, they are the students who have figured out what this teacher needs me to do, what this school needs me to do, how I need to show up. I was working with a student who was at a school with a uniform a number of years ago, and she had always been a very sort of incredibly obedient, well-behaved young woman, did her homework, showed up on time. And I noticed her senior year that every time I saw her, I didn't work at the school, but I saw her at the school frequently. And every time I saw her, she was wearing slippers and her shirt was untucked, neither of which was allowed at this school. And I said, girl, like, what's happening? How are you not getting in trouble? And she was like, because like everybody knows I'm a good kid. Everybody knows I do the right thing because I just like manage all the other pieces. So like nobody's noticing my shoes. And that's really like the secret. You need to learn the game of school. I was an English teacher. And I well understand that it's kind of a joke that English teachers are all like, we're all capricious. We want whatever we want. And it might be the opposite of what last year's teachers wanted. But actually, that's kind of true. So every teacher is telling you in their class the things that they think are important. So listen to them and learn how to appropriately follow their directions. And so that's how you manage the outside part of it. The next piece of it, I love this sort of image. There's no studying without writing or speaking. And I want you to think about that. There's very little you do in your life that only uses one of your senses. You have 5 senses. You have a lot of different things that your body and brain can do, and you are usually combining them. When you're cooking, you're usually smelling and tasting and measuring and doing all sorts of things. So when you're studying, a lot of kids, because we don't always teach students how to study, we just assume that you know it. A lot of people just like flip through stuff. When I ask them, how are you studying? They say, well, I read my notes or I look at the book. But then I'm only using my eyes. I'm only doing one thing. So instead, if you're reading out loud the notes that you're taking or the paper that you're writing, if you're walking around, if you're writing things down, just copying over your notes, then you're using more than one thing. There's a great study from about 15 years ago about an impact in lessening the incidence of Alzheimer's in a number of people because who were keeping journals. There's some evidence that if you are handwriting in a journal for many years, it just keeps your brain more active. And so the best way to be getting things again to go from your short-term to your long-term memory so that you're actually learning instead of just reading is to engage all of the different parts of your body and brain that you can. You know, when you're studying for a test, put things up on the wall, put like 8 by 11 papers up on the wall and write notes on each category as you're walking around your room. The other important thing to think about, and this is especially tricky when you are doing a block schedule, is you do kind of want to have a little bit of every class every day. I know that especially math teachers and language teachers always tell us that, and I know that most of us don't listen because we are sort of deadline driven. I need to just get these things done that are due, and then I'm done. And that's okay. You're gonna find in life that you lots of times are a little more deadline driven than others. But if you're looking at each class every day, even just to remind yourself what you did in class that afternoon for 5 minutes because you don't have any homework, then you're not going to be trying to remember it when you get to school the next day. And so just kind of giving yourself this bridge of a breather on every class before you go back into school the next day, you're not doing as much deep remembering or relearning at the start of every bell, which is way better for your brain and de-stresses the whole school process. And then we'll talk about this a lot more in the next couple of slides, but you want to, again, be realistic about what time you have and how long things are taking. And teachers are not always helpful here, right? Because every teacher will say, well, this isn't supposed to take you more than 45 minutes. Well, if I have 6 classes and each class is taking a half an hour to 45 minutes, that is just a touch, 3 or 4 hours of my life that I am expected to give to this homework. But of course, it doesn't quite work out that way. So you want to really take a look. Maybe when you come in from the before you kick off your shoes, as Ryan said, really take a look at kind of what do you have to get done tonight? How long is it going to take? And how can you then manage all the other things you want to get done in your life? I find that a lot of students do that kind of standing in front of their locker at the end of school, which isn't a bad time. There's a lot of chaos then, but if you can make yourself like take a minute, write some things down, figure out where your things are, organize your folders and materials according to whatever plan you just made, then you're ready to kind of approach all of that material.
Love it. I have a very specific index card method that I picked up from a book called The Organized Mind. And I don't always use it, but when I do, it'll really help me for 3 or 4 months before I get bored of it and need to cycle in another tool.
Right.
And what it is I write one task per index card and only one task. And then I just have a pile of index cards rather than a task list. And one thing that's useful about that is I can reprioritize and I can say, okay, well, these are the ones that I need to deal with for my school life. And then now here are the things that I need to do before I go home. And then here are the things that I need to do at home. So it's almost like a random access memory style technology, because I can find what I need to find, I can reorganize it, and it's not sort of fixed as a task list can be.
Yep. I know we are getting close to the time here, friends, so we will try to get through. But we want to make sure about a couple really big things when you think about time management. I know that is we've put this towards the end because a lot of students start here thinking that the problem is I need to learn time management, but in fact, there's a ton of other things that are a part of your organizational life that we want to make sure you're thinking about before you get to this. But the first big one here is multitasking is not real. When Ryan and I were planning this webinar, we were on Zoom like this, and at some point I decided to check my email and do something, and he said something to me and I was like, Ryan, I got nothing. I have no idea what you're saying, because I was not paying attention. Because as much as we think that everybody can do everything all the time, it is actually literally not how your brain works. Your brain cannot focus on 2 things at once. This is, again, the reason that words and music are tricky. You want to, when you're reading, when you're sleeping, when you're doing homework, you want to have music that doesn't have words, because your attention's going to go over there instead of where you want it to be. Now, Brian, I haven't even told you this. I had a student today in a meeting say to me, well, I really like the Pomodoro technique. I said, Julia, do you want to come run the webinar tonight instead of me? But I'm going to let you explain it, Ryan. What is the Pomodoro technique?
I love it. I love it. So the Pomodoro technique is a method by which you basically do interval training for your task list. So we want to build up to have really nice sustained periods of attention. However, there are sort of limits. We may need to address other things. We may need to bring the dog for a walk. We may just need to get a snack, right? So what one does is layers periods of intense work with no distractions, this kind of Spartan idea of I'm just going to get the work done, and I'm going to go pretty much as sort of intensely as I can, with periods in which we take a break. And I think one of the keys is that you manage the focus time, but almost more than that, you're managing the break time, right? So you set a timer for an interval of time. I think frequently what's recommended is 25 to 35 minutes, and then you have a break time, oftentimes 5 to 10 minutes. And so what we have here are a few different ways that you might manage those cycles. But if you have a long task list to do, this can be a really powerful way to knock out some of those tasks, because it's not like you're looking at I've got to study for 4 hours, right? And then that's not viable. And so you're looking in social and you're trying to do 7 things at once. It's really, oh, I just need to get through to 7 o'clock, right? Back to the floss one tooth. I can do a half an hour chunk if I then get 10 minutes to go eat a banana off Katie's counter. It makes it, again, more manageable. So that's for sort of in the moment, managing small scale chunks of time. Now we're going to zoom out a little bit more, because once you're managing those small chunks of time, there's some sense in which if you, how does the saying go? If you manage the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. So if you're focusing on your small scale time management, frequently, if you're more effective, then you'll have more time to play with in the aggregate. However, it can be really useful to set a time budget overall. So there's a concept in financial planning, which is the zero balance budget. And the notion is you don't, rather than just responding to impulses as they arise and sort of writing checks to pay your bills as the bills come in, instead, you put money aside for specific purposes that match your priorities and values. And the same notion can apply to scheduling your time. So the idea is, rather than, oh, at some point I've got to do this or that today, you say, no, it's really important that I practice guitar for half an hour. Otherwise, I'm going to be really grouchy. And so I'm going to do that from 8:30 to 9 p.m. Okay, now what else do I have to get in my day? And you sort of chart it out at the outset, again, leaving a little bit of flexibility in case things need to change, but you have a plan to start with. So here's a little bit of a sense of what that can look like, getting the practice stuff, getting the SAT tutor, all of that involved. And I think what's really key is we also manage our free time, because again, when we have this view of time management and executive functioning as basically external to us, right? Like I have these things that I have to do for other people in my life, then it makes sense that we're avoiding it because it's a super bummer. But if we think of it more as if I budget my time, then I will have more available to do the things that I care about and that I genuinely enjoy doing, time with my friends, deep, meaningful conversations, watching old movies, whatever your jam is, then it becomes a little bit more interesting, more fun to do this time budgeting.
And it's important to think about this on the weekends, especially when it feels like you have so much time ahead of you, because you are way less likely to effectively use the block of time if it feels like you have 8 or 12 hours free, or just the weekend free, without really adding in, well, but I've got that soccer tournament and it's 45 minutes away, and my mom likes us all to do dinner together on Saturdays, and I have to be. So if you can plan it out, then you have a way better sense of here's the time I get to use, and I want to make sure I use it effectively for my life and my friends.
Yeah, that's like a magic trick. I really don't understand how it works. That if I give structure to like a weekend free day, that after the day I've enjoyed it more. If there are like these little, I don't know, lanes in it or what have you. Now is the part of my day when I'm doing this. Like, I don't know why. Maybe it's something about how our brains work. Maybe it's social expectation. Maybe I just feel virtuous. I'm not sure, but I've definitely noticed that's real. It's not just sort of a convenient lecture to give or something. Oh, I think we all know what this is about. Basically, when I think it's more than anything just something to be aware of and to notice when you're doing it.
I think this is where the
Is
phrase
that
procrastinating came from.
procrastinating?
Yep.
That's
Yep.
fantastic. I don't know that.
I once in grad school, my roommate came home and I said, "Oh, I made chocolate chip cookies and banana bread." And she said, "Did you have a paper to write?" And I was like, "Ooh, I did."
Perfect. But you were being nice. You were being friendly.
Instead, I did this thing that made me feel good, but didn't make me write that paper.
Exactly. And again, I think this goes to things that look like work. You know, it's procrastination, but it's elegant, right?
Right.
I'm thinking about the font. I'm organizing my closet. Aren't I doing good things?
Right.
As though, you know, there's some judge of how you spend your time rather than your own sort of medium and longer term interests
Right.
driving the boat. All right, one more note here, I think, which is about managing priorities.
This is another huge one for college. I hear this question all of the time, and I talk to so many students who, for very good reasons, feel an incredible amount of stress about all of the things they're trying to fit in, all of the things that it feels like they absolutely have to do. I have to take all these APs. I have to fulfill my commitment to my soccer team. I have to babysit my brother this weekend. I have to, especially with the stress looming of getting into college when it feels like that becomes a more challenging task year after year after year. And again, I think it's important to remember that colleges are not looking for you to be a resume or a pile of stuff. They are looking for you to be a human, and they are looking for you to be a mature, responsible adult human who knows how to make good choices with your time, responsible choices for your well-being, how to dig into something that's important and how to let go of something that's not important. And you won't be able to get to any of that if you're still trying to do all the things. So it's important as you are, and this is especially hard, I think, as you become someone who's really good at stuff or who's used to saying yes to things, people ask you to do more things. People offer you more opportunities, or if you're, I hear this a lot from students who are co-leading clubs. If you're co-leading a club, especially if there's 3 of you, lots of times there's one person who's doing a ton more work than the other 2. And the other 2 may not even realize it. You're just, she said yes, she's offering, she's doing it, it's cool, it's fine, or he's really good at this, so he's taking it on. So you have to start to realize that you are not digging in deep enough to anything if you're trying to do everything. And high school is in many ways about figuring out who you are and finding your voice and organizing your time in a way that is helpful to you. And you won't be able to do that if you're letting all of these other things manage that time for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, you know, whether or not you learn sort of the cross of gold speech and which president gave that, or how to factor a polynomial, all of these kinds of lessons do persist into work life, into running the PTO, et cetera, et cetera. And so things like saying no to low priority, low value items really, I think, pays off a lot in the long run. Here's a list of resources that I really like here. I think the only one that we didn't mention in any depth is Randy Pausch's time management lecture. You can find that on YouTube. It's really fantastic. He makes a nice distinction between what is important and what is urgent. And he makes the point that frequently we focus on urgent, unimportant tasks before important, non-urgent tasks. And that gets us into those cycles of doing too much, procrastinating on the important thing, filling it up with lower value things at the outset. So that's what we've got for you tonight. We will be sending this conversation along to anybody who is registered. So if you're interested in checking out those resources, you can refer to the video for that. I'm Ryan Warren. I do tutoring and test prep. So if you have any of that, please feel free to shoot us an email. And I suspect
please feel free to email us if you have any questions.
Fantastic. Have a great night.
Have a great night.